Hi everybody, I'm Kris. Welcome to my channel. So the first part of the tour is going to start with my front porch. I've got nice, good southern exposure here, so it's nice and hot. And I'm in Zone 5 of the North Okanagan, British Columbia. So I've chosen to put all of my mostly nightshades up here because it's so hot. I find that where I live, they tend to do better in pots than in the ground, and I think it has something to do with root temperature. So a couple tomato plants doing nice. Not sure on the variety on these ones as they were gifted to me. And here I've got my lemon tree that I've grown from seed. And it's doing quite well. And just another tomato plant here. So it's mid-July. The tomatoes have got lots of green tomatoes on them, which is pretty good for our area. And it's been a slow start to spring this year. So I'm pretty grateful to have green tomatoes at this point. And here is my eggplant, and it's doing quite well. I'm pretty happy with this. Nice thick stalk. So we've got just some tomatoes here. I've got my banana tree, my dragon fruit, and I was inspired to grow dragon fruit from watching Epic Gardening, and they have a really cool YouTube channel, and I really want to make a dragon fruit support in the same style that he has, so that was a really cool channel. Check that out. So some other pepper plants here. And just some random potted plants, like I've got a coffee and some other citrus that I'm trying to germinate, like a Seville, I believe a Meyer lemon, and a Tangelo over there. So those are great. And of course, all the tropical plants I have to bring inside in my zone and put under an artificial grow light over the winter. They sort of go semi-dormant, I find, but they do just fine. I limit the watering and then bring them out as soon as the nights are tolerable. So here I am on the other side of the porch, and I've just got some potted perennials here. And even though I do live on a larger area outside of a town, I could, easily utilize all the ground space I wanted to. I still like container gardening for various reasons. These are woody perennials. They're herbs. I've got savory, some parsley over there, some sage, and I like to bring these inside over the winter. So I'm sitting here with my perennial herb garden, and I've got a lovely mix of oregano, lemon balm, St. John's wort, bee balm, chives. What else do I have in here? Catnip, horseradish, a whole bunch of stuff. So this is kind of just all intermingling, sort of doing its own thing naturally, and that's really my style of gardening. So here I am in my cucumber structure, and what we did to plant in here was we just dug into the ground, and quite deep actually. We double dug, so we removed a lot of really hard kind of clay material and replaced it with compost and other soil that we brought in, mulch, etc. And we've just built this up over the years. So this has been here for, oh boy, at least 6 years. As you can see, it's a decayed greenhouse, so the soil's well cultivated in here. So right here I've got an acorn squash and a zucchini, and I'm going to both train those to go vertically up this wire here. And I just find that way I get way less powdery mildew. I'm so tired of having powdery mildew on squash and cucumbers and stuff, so I never grow them on the ground anymore, even though we have the space again. It just seems to be like, you know, it just seems to work way better, and it looks really cool. And you can just walk around this structure and, you know, pick cucumbers and squash. So here I've got just intermittently planted some Tom Thumb lettuce, a poor little loofah I'm hoping will grow, but I think loofahs and things like cucamelons, lemon cucumbers, Armenian cucumbers, even though they are in the squash cucumber family, they seem to like a little warmer conditions than like the English cucumber or the pickling cucumber, which I have very good success with. And it's just been a cold spring, so you know, we've still got about 10 weeks of good growing before the frost comes here, so we'll see what these do. These plants do grow really quickly, so I'm hopeful. I'd love to harvest some loofahs, dry them out, and make soap out of them. That would just be so cool. So over here I've got my pickling cucumbers, and as you can see, they're doing a lot better. They're already extending themselves vertically, growing up the little bamboo canes, and then they'll go up and over the wire in the back there. So yeah. And then just in the corner, I always like to grow a massive tomato plant in this corner, and without a doubt every single year it always ends up being like 10-12 feet. And as you can see, this one here is probably about 5 feet tall already. And it's a beautiful yellow plum tomato. Just these tiny little 2-inch in diameter round tomatoes, soft skin, frost sensitive, but absolutely wonderful and delicious in salads. Okay, so lastly here, as you can see, I've got my cucamelons, and they're just starting to vine up. And I've got an English cucumber right to the side, and it's starting to vine up as well. So as you can see, I'm sitting here in my herb boat. I've got just a different beautiful array of herbs in here. Chives, parsley, tarragon, some bachelor buttons, hopefully for pollination, some mullein behind me, dill, cilantro, chamomile, and some mojito mint in the back. So interesting story about this boat. We actually used to fish in it. I caught a 20-pound lake trout in this boat right here. Yes, I did. It just became unworthy for the water, not very safe, so we decided to retire it and make it useful in the garden. Okay, so here I am at the main garden. This is a 20 by 20 raised bed, and it's 12 to 18 inches in some places. I've got all sorts of things in here. We've got garlic, onions, leeks, and brassicas, along with some other random plants just dotted around. So let me take you around. So I've got some potted pollinators here just on the edge of the garden. And this beautiful plant is my lovely red currant. It makes a beautiful jelly. Here I am in the brassica patch. Cauliflowers, broccoli, cabbages, kale. Here's a beautiful cauliflower. It should be harvested. It's just slightly starting to turn purple and open up, and they'll do that with sun exposure. So this is called snowball cauliflower. It's a self-blanching variety, but as you can see, it is overgrown. The leaves have started to open, and I do need to harvest this. So here I have leeks. Leeks do very well in my zone. They're one of the last things that I harvest out of the garden. Leeks and kale, probably. And I leave these in the ground pretty much till the first snowfall, because that's just when I can get to them. And I'll freeze the leeks, dehydrate them, and just eat them. And right next to the leeks, I've got a little hascap. Or honeyberry. Some beautiful purple cabbages, Savoy cabbage, and this plant right here is called a kaleette. I've never heard of it before, but apparently it's a cross between a cabbage and a kale. So it's supposed to produce like little cabbage, Brussels sprout, kale looking things. Anyway, I'm excited about it. Okay, so I'm at my garlic patch, and it's at the stage in its life where we stop watering it. Its leaves are starting to yellow. It needs to dry out. All of the energy is going to go from the leaves into the bulbs, increase bulb development, and then the skins will form. So that's all critical at this stage in its life right now. And it is normal for the garlic to flop over like this. So it flops over, and then that's an indication there's a bruise in the stem. So all of the energy then transfers from the leaf to the bulb. And that's the later stages of the garlic's life cycle. This is an interesting little story. This plant here kind of just randomly is grown amongst the garlic, and I have no idea what it is. I grew ground cherries and I grew tomatillos, and I grew another plant in the nightshade family called golden pearls. So something may have happened where all of those plants maybe cross-pollinated, and I have no idea. We've got a hybrid going on. So this plant here, it's its second year in production, and I know it's the same weird hybrid as I had last year because it just looks exactly the same. And it produced tons of these little tiny black fruits that tasted sort of like a watermelon, grew like a cherry, and the plant looks like a tomatillo. So I have no idea what this is, but it is really, really prolific, and it has self-sown all over the garden. So I'm sort of interested in plants like this because they've naturalized. And that's the style of gardening, as I mentioned before, that I really like because, again, I like to just encourage the idea of a wild garden, building the soil, not tilling it, seeds growing naturally on their own, and cultivating a wild garden and maintaining a wild garden as it grows up. So all over the garden I've got wild plants that have naturalized here, like mustard, bok choy, Swiss chard, carrot, beet, onion. Lots of onion varieties will easily just start self-seeding everywhere. Dill, cilantro, of course, chamomile. So you do have to be careful with some of the plants because they do tend to be invasive, or they can. But it's an interesting style of gardening, so I do the naturalization along with the intentional planting. So yeah, so we'll see what becomes of this, and I have no idea how I'll use it, but it's just a really interesting experiment. Here's an example of a plant called purslane. It's a wild plant, a weed, a Eurasian transplant, I'm really not sure. But it grows very prolifically wild in our area. It's all over the garden here, and it's usually something that I have to weed, but I just let it grow in certain areas just along this bank of the garden here where I want to prevent some erosion, and just helps kind of to mulch the garlic. So this is an edible plant. You can saute it. It's delicious. You can eat it raw. It's super healthy for you. But other plants I like to just naturally let grow. The odd plant here or there that grow naturally here, like our plantain, mullein, and lamb's ear. So those are other kind of useful plants. They're edible and medicinal, and you can selectively just allow them to grow into your garden. Okay, I'm standing here in my root vegetable patch, and I grow beets, carrots, parsnips, and celeriac and turnips here. So pretty new area of the garden. I've only had it for 3 years. We're just really working on soil development here. So mulching, doing some chop and drop, adding compost, and any natural fertilizers that we can get our hands on. One thing we've started doing recently in the past couple of years is making our own fish fertilizer. So whenever we go fishing, we of course consume the meat, and then the carcass is left to make fish fertilizer with. So that's an interesting process that is completely organic and using every part of the animal up, and I love that. And it makes an absolutely wonderful fertilizer, so if you're into that kind of thing, give that a try. One thing I really like to do with root vegetables is with carrots. I like to grow several different varieties of the carrots. There's 5 different varieties here because I find carrots sometimes I have like iffy germination with. I don't know why. It's a slower seed to germinate. And then some of the like I love the heirloom varieties, but I do find some of them can go to seed or get woody, and I'm not sure exactly why that happens to me, but I do find that with carrots, I like to grow just many different varieties, and I have the best success that way. So hopefully this year I can get enough carrots to maybe put in the freezer or do some dehydrating with. Nice big beautiful rhubarb patch, and that's just on the edge of the root vegetable garden. So if you've ever grown this plant before, you know that it's horseradish. Horseradish is a really hardy member of the brassica family. It's a taproot. It's a perennial. It grows by taproot division, and I'm not sure whether or not it does make seeds. It probably does. I've never really seen seeds myself come off the flowering stalks, although they do make a flowering stalk. Just not sure whether or not they're a true seed or not. But this plant is the last plant, one of the very last things, along with the leek and the kale, to come out of the garden every year. And we dig it up in October here. That's when the frost comes. And I make horseradish. Okay, this big overgrown mess is my potato patch and a little corner of celery here. Now celery is in the carrot parsley family, and it's a perennial plant. These flowering stalks here of the celery were actually from last year, so we'll get celery seed, and I will of course save it and use the seed for a spice. Why not? That's super cool. And then this celery here in front was celery I grew from seed, and I've got 2 different varieties. One is the Utah and one is the Tango, and I'm just seeing what grows best for me. I like to grow multiple varieties of almost everything just to ensure crop security, I suppose. So, you know, just to make sure I get something. I've got 4 different varieties of potato here. We've got Kennebec, Russet, Red Pontiac, and Yukon Gold. That was the 4th one. Yeah, so those are growing really good. I had great success with my potatoes last year. We had potatoes to sustain us the whole year, and then of course seed to plant. So that was great. We didn't have to buy potatoes at all last year, and they were so tasty. They stored right up until March, no problem, in cardboard boxes, just in the cool, dark basement with pretty low humidity. So that was pretty easy and something I will definitely do again. I'm doing the no-hill potato grow method this year. So that's where I just plant the potatoes like 12 inches down and just bury them really, really deep. and so I don't have to hill them up, because again, that's just extra work, and I'm maintaining a pretty fair-sized garden here. So yeah, less is better. So this is my beautiful potato patch. So this area of the garden is the bean patch, and it's only 4 years old. It's just made out of 3 log tripods attached at the top there and dug into the ground. So we are still developing this soil, and the beans seem to be doing all right here. I've got green beans, purple beans, just a couple of peas I've thrown in the bottom, but last year I got quite a nice harvest of beans, and at the end of the year it was grown right up over the overhang here. So I'll do an end of season garden tour and show you what the beans look like. So this area of the garden is fairly new. I've got corn here and peas here. It's fairly shady, and it's just in front of my compost pile. So we are just building the soil here and developing it, and it's coming along quite nicely. So I'm harvesting some peas already. So last but certainly not least is my compost heap, and it's just behind the corns and the peas here. And as I was mentioning before, that really weird nightshade hybrid, this is it growing out of the compost pile. So what I intend on doing, I just let this grow up, is I'm going to take the edge trimmer and just do a massive chop and drop and just enhance the nutrients in the compost. So every year, I mean, my compost is pretty crude here. I don't have any boxing or any structure to it really. It's just 3 massive piles. Old, older, and oldest. And basically what I do is just turn it over every year. They have to be aerated and turned over. And then at the beginning of the spring, I go and I get the new compost that's all ready to go. So it's pretty easy. It takes about 1.5 years, but I do layer my compost like with sticks and leaves and different organic material to give it that lasagna layered effect so that there's aeration through it. So that really helps with the compost. And then I just compost all of my organic material from the house, from eating, of course, you know, any yard waste or anything like that. And yeah, just all goes into here. Okay, everybody, well, that concludes my garden tour. Thanks for joining. It's been really fun showing you the garden. I hope maybe you've learned something or see something you want to do, something that inspires you. If you have any tips or tricks or something you'd like me to know, please leave it in the comments. And like this video if you like what you are watching, and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more. So I'm Kris, and this has been Kris's Kitchen. Have a great day. Thanks.